I don't know if this is working. Good morning. This is Pastor Ryan here. I've got another daily office reflection for you from the Book of Common Prayer. Today, our psalm is Psalm 41. The psalm reads, "Happy are those who consider the poor. The Lord delivers them in the day of trouble. The Lord protects them and keeps them alive. They are called happy in the land. You do not give them up to the will of their enemies. The Lord sustains them in their sickbed, and in their illness you heal all their infirmities. As for me, I said, O Lord, be gracious to me. Heal me, for I have sinned against you. My enemies wander in malice. When I die and my name perish. And when they come to see me, they utter empty words, while their hearts gather mischief. When they go out, they tell it abroad. All who hate me whisper together about me. They imagine the worst for me. They think that a deadly thing has fastened on me, that I will not rise from where I lie. Even my bosom friend, in whom I trusted, who ate of my bread, has lifted the heel against me. But you, O Lord, be gracious to me. Raise me up that I may repay them. By this I know that you are pleased with me, because my enemy has not triumphed over me. But you have upheld me because of my integrity, and will set me in your presence forever. Blessed be the Lord, the God of Israel, from everlasting to everlasting." Well, that is Psalm 41, and it's quite different from many of the other psalms. It's a very personal and vulnerable one. It clearly is written from the perspective of one who is going through an ailment and just somebody who's sick. It's accredited to David, and so it is David talking about all of his enemies and even those closest to him turning on him. Now, one of the reasons this could be is often in ancient times, they assumed that the sicknesses that people suffered from were due to people being sick. That makes no sense. It was due to a curse from God, and they might have considered people who got sick to be sinners. Evidence for this comes from, I think it's John 9. You can double check me, but it's the miracle story of the man who was born blind. And they asked Jesus, for whose sin was he blinded? Was it for his own sin or the sin of his parents? And so they considered ailments to be punishments from God. And so it's very possible that people turned away from David, not wanting to have, like, as if God's curse could splash from David onto them. But David places his hope in God, and he says that God is pleased with him, and the way that he knows it is because the enemy has not triumphed over him. And honestly, I worry about this because sometimes we attribute to God bad things when they are not necessarily because of God. Similarly, we might misattribute good things. And I worry, like, the scriptures can do this because they're the scriptures, but for us, I wonder what it means to use the Lord's name in vain. And I think sometimes we use the Lord's name in vain when we can't understand something. So we just say, oh, that's God. That seems to be vainly using God's name instead of using it intentionally. But the psalm doesn't end there. It has two other parts to it. It says that happy are those who consider the poor, for the Lord delivers them in the day of trouble. And so the assumption that we should have is that David has considered the poor because David is being delivered. Because those who consider the poor are sustained on their sickbed, and in their illnesses, you heal all their infirmities. And it ends by saying, blessed, but you have upheld me because of my integrity, meaning because of my care for the poor. What this doesn't say is that we will avoid calamity if we care for the poor, but that God will see us through it. And it's once again a time when the scriptures speak to care for the poor as essential to what God desires from God's people. We find justice and care for the poor and taking care of the widow and the needy throughout all of the Psalms. Not explicitly in all of them, but it's a theme that just runs through the Psalms. I find it fascinating that in today's world, the church often gets hit for being callous or for not caring for the weak. And there's many who make that argument, and there might be something true to that, but maybe that's just because we're not caring enough for the poor. But in ancient time, or not ancient, but in history, recent history, like Nietzsche couldn't stand Christianity because it was too weak, because it took care of the weak, because it didn't say that the strong needed to prevail. Like Nietzsche and Christianity do not square, because Nietzsche did not want the weak to be taken care of. They should die so that the Superman should rise, the Übermensch. And there are other atheists who have followed along similarly. There was a time in American history when people were performing genetic experiments on minorities, so that they could, because they thought minorities were subhuman. So like, go research the Tuskegee experiments if you're not aware of those, where they tested out syphilis on Black men, or the eugenics program in North Carolina. There was a settlement, I think in 2010 or 2011, somewhere in there was a giant settlement where the federal government paid all these women who they intentionally sterilized. So eugenics and genomics, or gene modification stuff, happened. It was the science that got exported to Germany that the Nazis used for their genetic experiments on people in their attempts to create the Uber race, the Übermensch. And so often the world, through the scientific, evolutionary biologist lens, it can lead to the devaluation of human life, to saying that those who are poor deserve to be poor, those who are poor just are lazy, or we don't need to care for them. And that is the exact opposite of what the scriptures teach us. The psalmist says that those who do so are happy, and God will take care of them for their care of the poor. And I think that's just another reminder that right now, always we should be taking care of the poor, but especially right now, we should be looking out for the least of these. And that can be hard to do because we might not know, and we might embarrass people. So some ways to do that is to give to different charities. Feeding America, of course, is one. You could give to food banks that are active. We have a pantry, but it's not active right now because we don't have the resources to give out food safely. If you are able to give money to places like Mel Trotter or Dégagé, you should do so. That's a good way to care for the poor. In our church, we have a fund for other small churches that are struggling financially. You can give to that too. You can make masks, and I'm honestly struggling to find ways of how we help the poor in this time. If you think of ways, why don't you write it in? Say how you think we can take care of the poor, because clearly there's a command and a statement that we will be happy if we do so, contented if we do so, and that through these actions, God is blessed. Because in the end, it's all about bringing God glory. So may the Holy Spirit inspire you today to take care of the least of these. And you take care as well. God bless.